Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om 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 Jnanatimidambasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuveva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're off. Ready? So, which verse are we discussing today? 4.6. 4.6. So last time we discussed verse 4.5. So Krishna was saying, many births you and I have passed. I remember all of them, but you cannot. O subduer of the enemy. Okay? That's what we discussed last time. So this title of this chapter again is
Transcendental knowledge.
Transcendental knowledge, which means knowledge about Supreme Personality of Godhead and
the knowledge which does not change.
absolute truth, knowledge that does not change. So knowledge of the Supreme Lord and who else? Who else?
Living entities.
How about the
Us.
Yes.
Us. Right? The soul, the spirit soul. Right? So transcendental knowledge is knowledge that is beyond the material knowledge. And transcendental knowledge is something that does not change in time. Because as Mataji said, it is the absolute truth. Right? What is the meaning of absolute truth?
Even if we take, it's still absolute.
So, even if we take, I'm sorry, what did you say?
Always absolute.
Always absolute. Yeah?
Final verdict. verdict kind of thing.
Final verdict. I like that. Any other kind of characteristics of absolute truth?
There's no impurity in it, like it's perfect.
Oh, it's perfect.
So there is no more than above that.
There's nothing beyond that,
Beyond that,
right?
yeah.
That's like the absolute verdict. It's perfect. It's always true.
Yeah.
It's not true just in 2022 in the month of March. It's not just true in the age of Kali Yuga. It's not just true in this earthly planet. It is the absolute truth, meaning it is the truth in all times, in all places, and in all circumstances. There is no circumstance, no time, no place in which this transcendental knowledge is not the final verdict, is not the perfect and final truth. It is always absolute. And so with that, then we can have full, unencumbered faith to apply this knowledge. Right? Sometimes we get knowledge in different mediums. But if it doesn't relate to us, we just sort of dismiss it and move on. Right? It's not applicable to me. It might be relevant knowledge, but it's not applicable to me. So then we move on. But this transcendental knowledge, we should have full faith. It is directly applicable to all of us. And it is the perfect knowledge. Right? So, and we see all other knowledge that we have, it's not absolute. It's all relative knowledge. Right? When we look at the temperature outside, we say it's cold outside. Is that the absolute truth? No. It's cold relative to where?
Room temperature.
Yeah. You know, today it's cold relative to maybe Florida,
Oh, yeah.
but relative to Antarctica, is it cold? It's warm. Right? So it's all. So we are constantly acquiring these relative truths. This is all material knowledge, and all material knowledge ultimately ends in birth, death, old age, and disease. Repeated birth and death. So transcendental knowledge is knowledge that allows us to achieve a higher, ultimate purpose in life. So to know what is that purpose in life, what is that absolute activity that will give me perfection of life, that is contained within transcendental knowledge. So this chapter is giving us perfect transcendental knowledge. And if we had to summarize all transcendental knowledge into its most simplest form, it's knowledge about who am I,
What is the
who is Krishna,
What's that?
and what is the relationship.
Relationship.
That is the summary of all transcendental knowledge. Who am I? Who is Krishna? And what is my relationship? With these three pieces of information, I actually have everything I need to achieve perfection in life. And I'm wondering, why are we continuing and studying over and over and over? Because to know just even who am I is not such a easy process. It's simple. I'm spirit soul. But to realize it takes some time. And Krishna says in the coming verse, he says that actually, if you just know the transcendental nature of his appearance and activities, if you just know Krishna, the nature of his appearance and his activities, one becomes liberated. Because by knowing that, we actually understand everything about the supremacy of Krishna and also the position of each of us. And the conclusion of that knowledge is devotional service. So let us now discuss then the 6th verse. It looks like a little bit of a long purport, but we'll read it and unpack it with the time we have available. So I would like to read the 6th verse.
अजो आपि सन अव्यय
सर्वभूतानां ईश्वरो अपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वम् अधिष्ठाय संभवामि आत्ममयाय. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, by my internal energy I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
Report.
Purport. The Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth, although he may appear like an ordinary person. He remembers everything of his many, many past births, whereas a common man cannot remember what he has done even a few hours before. If someone is asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. And yet men often dare claim to be God or Krishna. One should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Then again, the Lord explains his Prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as Swarupa or one's own form. The Lord says that he appears in his own body. He does not change his body as the common living entity changes from one body to another. The conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, but he has a different body in the next birth. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body but transmigrates from one body to another.
The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the same original body by his internal potency. In other words, Krishna appears in this material world in his original eternal form with two hands holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes his birth like an ordinary living entity. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it still appears that Lord Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond youth. At the time of the battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home, or in other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculations. Still, he looked just like a young man, 20 or 25 years old. We never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us. Although he is the oldest person in the whole creation, past, present and future, neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss and knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising, moving before us, and then disappearing from our eyesight. When the sun is out of sight, we think that the sun has set, and when the sun is before our eyes, we think that the sun is on the horizon. Actually, the sun is always in its fixed position. But owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary, common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency. And he is never contaminated by material nature. The Vedas also confirm that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations.
The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In the Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayana with 4 hands and the decorations of 6 kinds of food opulences. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that they can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is and not on the mental concoction or imaginations which the impersonalist wrongly thinks the Lord forms to be. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to the Lord's causeless mercy according to the Vishwakosa dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all of all of his previous appearance and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as he gets another body. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and body. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in the world. This is explained in the next verse.
Okay, so long purport. So the verse again reads, although I am unborn and my chance of the body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So remember, this verse and the prior verse is response to Arjuna's question. And what question did Arjuna ask just a couple of verses ago?
I mean, how did you know before
Present future.
Vishwavan was born?
Yeah.
In that context. Yeah.
So Krishna
You were not there when Vishwavan was born.
so Krishna opens a chapter by saying this knowledge. Remember again, how old is the Bhagavad Gita?
Eternal.
No, this is like millions of years ago.
This is absolute truth. Right? This Bhagavad Gita is not, okay, Dwapara Yuga is coming to an end, we're on this battlefield, now this knowledge applies. This same knowledge was spoken millions of years ago. Right? So Arjuna asked the question, wait a minute, how you could have spoken this knowledge to Vivaswan? You know, you and I, Krishna, were about the same age from material calculation. Right? So I wasn't around. How you could have spoken previously? Right? So Krishna said in the last verse, the 5th verse, he says, many births you and I have passed. So we have both passed many births. I can remember all of them, but you cannot. So herein lies a very simple conclusion. There's some difference between us and Krishna. Right? Some similarities appear. Right? Krishna seems to be born. We seem to be born. Krishna has 2 arms, 2 legs. Okay? So there's some similarities that appear. But there is quite a distinct difference. And the distinct difference in the last verse was enunciated that he can remember and we do not. So that's one distinct difference. Now here, Krishna gives a second distinct difference between his body and ours. And what is that?
He never grows whatever he likes.
He never what?
He will not grow beyond that. Whatever what he wished to like, he will grow and he will stop.
So his body never deteriorates. Does our body deteriorate?
Yes.
When this hurts, I cannot see like I used to, as we grow up, in the youth age, we kind of, our body's growing, but then once we hit the prime, and then it just starts to deteriorate, right? So we know that our body deteriorates, but Krishna's body does not, right? So let us understand that there is a stark difference between us and Krishna. Right? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we are the tiny spark, part and parcel of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we are qualitatively similar with Krishna, but by quantity meaning of potency, of ability, we are very tiny. So simultaneously one and different. Now in material logic, this is not conceivable, right? How can something be the same and different? Right? I have 2 cookies, they're the same, but as I said, no, they're different. And we don't see. But spiritually, this is the inconceivable potency. And thus Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Achintya Beda Beda Tattva. So this is the very important understanding, that we are distinct. So this again, who am I? Who is Krishna? And what is the relationship? Transcendental knowledge. So we're learning about Krishna's position. We already know about ours, right? So we know our body, it deteriorates, right? That we know. Now Krishna's body, at least we don't know for sure, but we're going to see from Shastra, and we have some evidence, right? What evidence does Srila Prabhupada speak to in the purport to suggest his body doesn't deteriorate?
He remains youth.
Sunshine, sunsets, and just.
Okay, that's the example. But how does he tell that Krishna's body doesn't deteriorate? By?
He remains youthful.
Always youth in the field of
Kurukshetra.
Like, even though he got many great grandchildren and everybody, he was still youth.
He was still youth. He wasn't using some good anti-aging wrinkle cream, doing some good spa treatments, facials, and things like that. No. Right? He was ever youthful, though he, by material calculation, had passed 100 years. Right? By 100 years, we expect somebody walking, with a stick, a little bit leaning. Right? We have that, but we know that doesn't. But wait a minute. Krishna's body, it did change, right? He was a small baby in the prison house. Then as he went to Gokul, he was a small baby. Then as he grew up, then he went to Chattikar, he became a little small boy, and then ultimately to Nandagram. He was growing up. Right? So how does Krishna's body change?
He wants.
he as his own wish.
So the first thing is, Krishna, Prabhupada says, appears in his own transcendental form. So we say, I am not this body, I am spirit soul. Right? So this, we see, is all matter. As soon as the soul leaves, this becomes dull matter. And ultimately will decompose back into earth. It's made up of earth, air, fire, water, ether. 5 earthly elements. Right? What is Krishna's body made up of? He's got an arm, bluish color. What is it made up of? Sat Chit Ananda. Sat Chit Ananda. Eternal knowledge, bliss. That is the ingredients of his body. What else is made up of Sat Chit Ananda?
His potency.
What else is Sat Chit Ananda?
Our souls.
Our souls.
Our souls, yeah.
Because our souls come from Krishna.
No.
If we are part and parcel of Krishna, we would have the same constitution. Just like if I extract a drop of water from the ocean, it'll have the same chemical composition as the whole of the ocean. In ratio. In quantity, it'll have very little salt. But in composition, it'll be the same, right? Because it's coming from the soul. Our soul is also Satchitananda. So when Krishna appears, he's appearing in his original form. There's no body, per se, like we know. In Krishna's, there's no veins and bones and arteries and intestines, and there's no machinery. It is all Satchitananda. So we know that the soul is Sat, it's eternal. So thus, how Krishna's body or form can deteriorate. Right? The only thing that deteriorates is matter. Matter by the force of time. Time is Krishna's all-devouring energy. Right? So time is what pushes matter through this different stage. So time cannot touch spirit. The spiritual energy. Krishna already established in the 2nd chapter, right? That spirit cannot be touched by any weapon. You cannot cut the soul by any weapon. You cannot burn it by fire. You cannot moisten it by water. You cannot wither it by wind. All these things, he said, you cannot, Right? So when Krishna's form, when he descends, he is untouched by the material nature. But we, on the other hand, can we stop the influence of time upon us?
No.
Sometimes we wish we could. But we cannot stop the influence of time. Right? But the influence of time does not touch spirit. So when Krishna comes, does our soul age?
No.
Does the soul deteriorate?
No.
It is Satchitananda. So, this is the stark difference between us and Krishna. Did any of us get to pick our birthday? What day I'll appear in this world? Anybody got to pick? Anybody got to pick which home I'll appear in? How about Krishna? Krishna comes when he chooses to come, by his supreme will. How is our birth determined?
Past and karma.
By the laws of karma. Nature imposes upon us a body, a form. Randomly? No. Based on our past activities. As sanctioned by Krishna. Right? So we get this body, okay, let's make the best of it. But we do not get to choose. But Krishna chooses. Right? So is Krishna born to Mother Devaki? Trick question.
He appeared.
Yeah.
in a-
He selected.
He appears. We see, how did he first appear? Babe, Lord Narayan form. Any baby has appeared like that? No. And then he transformed into the small baby form. Right? So Krishna can choose the different shapes that he likes. So as Krishna is performing his pastimes in Vrindavan, he says, okay, today I'll grow a little bit. Why?
He wants to satisfy Mother Yashoda.
To give the pleasure to all the devotees. We know what is like when we have a small child, what gives so much happiness to mother and father and loved ones around? When child grows little, does some new activity. Oh, he's walking now. Oh, he can jump now. Oh, he can lift this like this. It gives sweet pleasure and happiness. So Krishna every day is unfolding new and new things. But not by him learning through the influence of time, but simply by his desire to give pleasure. And he can also stop and pause his growth. As we know, once he reaches, youthful age, he doesn't age anymore. So Krishna's form transforms only by his will, not by the force of any other power. But our form, it transforms by the force of time, the Skala energy. It pushes through 6 stages, from birth to growth, to maintenance, reproduction, dwindling, and ultimately destruction. These 6 stages, every living entity's body will go through. But Krishna is not. So Krishna here is establishing very unequivocally the distinct position of him versus us. So that we don't make the one common mistake, the one foolish mistake. And what is that?
Both are same.
Both are same. Or maybe, Krishna maybe is just some powerful person. But nothing,
What is Sarupya?
Huh?
Sarupya, Sayuja, Sarupya. There's 5 forms, 5 liberations are there, right? Sarupya is
That's to have a form similar.
similar.
but still is not the same. Form meaning having a four-armed form in Vaikuntha Loka.
Similar for
Yeah. Very beautiful, very lustrous form in the spiritual world. Right? So, this important point there is made that Krishna appears in his original form. And we are appearing, our spirit soul also has a form. That form, when we ultimately lose this material body and return back home to the spiritual world, we'll regain our original spiritual form, which is also made up of Sat Chit Ananda. And it'll not age also. It won't grow old, because we just said the soul is not growing old, right? Only thing that is growing old is the body, the material body. But the spirit soul is ever youthful. Our spirit soul also. So that spirit soul will ultimately regain its original form as well, as we shed the gross body, the subtle body, all the way down to the false ego. So this becomes the foundation for understanding the difference between us and Krishna. And when we understand that, it leads to only one conclusion. There's only one logical conclusion from understanding the distinction between, okay, Krishna is this eternal, unlimited, transcendental form, and we are a small speck of that. And what is that conclusion?
We are not the same.
We're not the same.
Krishna is the source of everything.
Yeah,
So-
part and parcel.
We're part and parcel. And what? Huh?
He's the supreme absolute truth.
He's the supreme absolute truth. And we are
His eternal servants.
his eternal servants. We are dependent on Krishna. Right? Nitya Nityananam, Chaitananas Chaitananam. Krishna is eternal, we are eternal. There are many eternals. But among all eternals, there is one supreme eternal. Eko Bahunam Vidadatikam. Who is maintaining all other eternals. There's one supreme eternal, Krishna, who is maintaining all other eternals, the living entities.
Is there anything between that? No.
Technically, no. There's Shambhu Tattva, who is in between the Jiva Tattva and Krishna. But
I heard that the soul is like, size of the soul is very 100 times of the hair or something like that. But somebody told sometimes this body, and they told some other swarupam of the same body, right? I mean, this is the physical body and this is the subtle body kind of thing.
yeah, so what?
What is that subtle body? And they say subtle body is bigger than the real body,
So-
something like that. And
so-
it is always outside, outside our main body.
The subtle body is by definition subtle. It's not gross, so we cannot like put a tape measure and measure it per se. But the subtle body is first comprised of the false ego. The false ego is the bodily consciousness, the covering of their understanding that I am spirit soul. So that covers entirely the spirit soul. So actually the spirit soul in its original form, it shrinks and it compresses down to this 10,000th the tip of a hair. And it is covered by the false ego. And that false ego can be quite significant depending on how much we have developed this bodily consciousness. And what we are in the process of doing is taking a hammer and a chisel and just breaking away at that false ego. You can imagine like when you have a big diamond and it's embedded in all the coal around. You have to like chisel out to get the stone. So like that, we are chiseling away at the false ego. So everyone's false ego is in different depth of how much the intense the covering is. Beyond the false ego then is the intelligence. The decision-making power within the living entity. Or the embodied living entity, I should say.
But is that not the brain which is the physical brain which...
The physical brain includes the mind, which is the storehouse of all of the desires within the mind. So the mind stores all these desires, and the intelligence is the decision maker, right? We have had this conversation between the mind and intelligence. Mind says do something, intelligence says it's not good. And sometimes the mind wins, and sometimes the intelligence wins. And so we've all had that experience. That's how we can, in some way. But again, it's subtle. Subtle meaning it's not so easy to understand the exact. I can understand the difference between hand and foot because it's gross. Subtle, it becomes a little bit hard to distinguish exactly, but we can distinguish it by different perceptions. So this is the way we can understand the different distinction between the mind and the intelligence. But all three, mind, intelligence, false ego, they are the subtle body. The gross body is made up of, that's what we see, the 5 main elements. So ultimately, the gross body and the subtle body is all material. So the spirit soul, when it descends from the spiritual world, it acquires the false ego, the mind intelligence, and then ultimately the gross body.
Is the false ego and free will both are same?
No. Free will is the intrinsic nature, the ability of the soul. The false ego is a function of misuse of our free will. Meaning, we had the free will, and we desire to try to be independent of Krishna. So because of that desire, Krishna said, well, you cannot be independent of me, that I am the maintainer of all. But if you want to try to experience some semblance that I have created this material world, it is all under Maya, illusion. The illusion is that we are separate from Krishna. But you can be there and try. So we said, okay. We exercised our free will. So as we came, then the false ego covers. Why the false ego covers? So that we forget I am spirit soul. Because as soon as I see spirit soul, I know correlations with Krishna. But I ask Krishna, no, I don't want to be with you. So the false ego was created by our desire. And it also will be eliminated by our desire. So that free will led to the acquisition of the false ego, subsequently intelligence, mind, and numerous bodies that we have And so when Krishna appears, the example Prabhupada gives is of the sun, right? When the sun rises, we don't say the sun was born. It is now just appearing in our vision. Like that, Krishna is always present. But he's appearing in different places, performing different pastimes. But he's always present. Just as the sun is appearing in different parts of the world. Right now, the sun is rising in one part of the world. In a moment later, it'll be rising in another part of the world. Like that, we can try to understand that Krishna's presence, he's always there. So actually, we don't really say he is born. We say that conventionally. But technically, he appears. We are born. But Krishna appears. And why he appears, that's what will be answered next week in the next 2 verses, 7 and 8. But that is the nature of his appearance.
Is Maya creates free will?
No, Maya doesn't create free will. Maya is illusion, right?
So that's the illusion, right? Free will is then it is the illusion.
Free will is the opportunity for us to make decisions. Maya, illusion, covers our vision. But I can exercise my free will and say, Krishna, I don't want to be influenced by Maya. And so now Maya will no longer influence me. So
that is not practically possible, right?
it's absolutely possible.
No, he himself told Mama Maya, right?
Yeah, and then he says, Mamiva ye prapadyante. If you surrender unto me,
Then we'll,
yeah. Daivihesha gunamaya mamaya maya durate. Very difficult to overcome this divine energy of mine. But the second half of that verse, Mamiva prapadyante. If you surrender unto me, mayam itam tadantite. You can easily overcome illusion. Right? So we on our own power cannot overcome Maya. Right? But with the power of Krishna, because Maya is serving who?
Krishna.
Right? Maya is serving Krishna. So if Krishna says, my dear Mahadevi, do not block this person, of course she'll be most happy. Right? So Maya is very strong. But in light of Krishna, so that is the only means. We cannot remove Maya through our own analytical study, through our own, that won't happen. But by surrender to Krishna, then Maya was easily overcome.
so Maya didn't create free will then.
No. Free will is created by Krishna. And why Krishna gave every living entity free will? Because Krishna ultimately created all of us to experience love. He wanted to experience love with all the living entities. Well, if there is no free will for the living entity to love, then it's forced love. That's not real. That's not real. So the living entity always has its free will. It is an eternal, I don't know how to call it. It's an eternal function or feature of the spirit soul. So we can always choose what we want to do.
So the free will is also covered by the ego then?
Well, in the spiritual world, it is not. So in the spiritual world, and again, when we say free will, it's limited free will, right? I cannot say, hey, I want it to be sunny right now, it'll be sunny. No. That I have limited free will. Krishna has absolute free will. If Krishna wants it to be sunny right now, sun will come. Because he has absolute free will. We have very limited free will. Our free will is dependent on many other things. But that free will in the spiritual world is also there. That I want to serve Krishna. If I say, I don't want to be with you, Krishna, I want to be separate from you, then by the exercise of our free will, then we acquire the false ego, the material body. And right? So that free will is present both in the spiritual and the material world. So the issue is, the vast majority of living entities have remained in the spiritual world. So what's the difference? They have never misused their free will we have. So the intelligent soul, what Arjuna did at the beginning of this Bhagavad Gita, he said, Krishna, he didn't say it this way, but really this is how we should understand it. By my own free will, I cannot solve my problems. You take control of my free will. And you tell me what is best for me. I am a surrendered soul unto you. The real intelligence is, Krishna, I am not responsible for my free will. I make too many bad decisions. You please take and guide me as to it. That is also exercise of our free will, to surrender it. That is the meaning of really surrender. And by surrendering to Guru and Krishna, then we'll be protected in the exercise of our free will. But free will is always there because it is essentially created to be able to express real love. Otherwise, it's just forced. And if we are forced to serve Krishna, then what is the point of anything? Right? So Krishna says, no, you have all the facility, now you decide. He told Arjuna at the end, I've explained everything. Would you like me to repeat anything? I'm ready to. No? Okay. Now you do as you choose. And what did Arjuna say? Karishye vachanam tava. I am prepared to follow as you direct. He surrendered back his free will. And that is the perfection of consciousness. Recognizing, okay, I'm not responsible of my free will. That is, but that takes the, breaking down the ego to be able to come to that point. Yeah. Go ahead, Anumata. Go ahead, Anumata.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So the false ego is not for any other, only for the living entities, right? It means for
Material.
human, for human only, right?
No. Dog, cat, all.
The
Yeah.
false ego.
Yeah, they don't know their spirit soul. False ego, remember, false ego. Ego means I am.
Yeah.
False sense of I am. Dog thinks he's dog. Dog doesn't think I am part and parcel of Krishna. So he has false ego. Right? The last thing we'll lose before going to the spiritual world is our false ego. It is the most subtle of the subtle body. Mind is like the least subtle, then intelligence gets a little bit more subtle, and then false ego is the most subtle. And we'll shed the false ego ultimately in going to the spiritual world. Yeah?
Just like an addition to what Prabhu was asking, so is the free will influenced or executed by Maya or mind or intelligence or false ego? Who is influencing the free will? I know I have free will, but the free will to do a certain thing, who is actually influencing it or executing it?
Okay, so now we're getting into, in the later part of the Bhagavad Gita, we'll get into the different constituents of action and how action is carried out. So, in kind of summary, there's a few more deeper levels of detail. So let's start at the summary level. If you're okay with that, we'll stop. Otherwise, we can go into the deeper levels. At the summary level, the living entity expresses its desire. I would like to have pizza. That's my free will to express. Right? Now, Krishna, sitting in our heart as Paramatma, hears that desire. Now, hearing that desire, because our free will is not absolute. If Krishna wants pizza, pizza comes. Because his free will is absolute. Our free will is very limited. So Krishna now hears that desire and then determines, based on our past actions, are we qualified to have pizza? Meaning, have we earned enough good credits and karma credit like that? If so, then material nature will orchestrate the arrangement of pizza to us. Because we actually cannot do anything. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha hankara vimutatma kartaham iti manyate. Everything is being executed by the modes of material nature. For me to move my hand like this, who's moving the hand?
We desire and Krishna facilitate.
But I think I'm doing. All I am doing in that action is expressing a desire to move my hand like this. Once I express the desire, that desire is heard. If it's sanctioned at a hand to move, then the neurons in the brain fire signals down the spinal cord, twitch the muscle. None of that's in my control. It's in my body. I don't control any of that. That is all done by nature. So material nature actually carries out the execution and the moving of the hand, but under the supervision of Krishna. And that is why, I'll come back to your question in a second, this very, famous picture. And if you have your Bhagavad Gita, you go to plate 6, you can see that these people are doing different work, but actually they're like puppets being pulled here and there by the modes of nature. But who is situated above the modes of nature? Krishna. So, our free will allows us to execute a desire. From there, it is completely out of our hands. Then it is between Krishna's sanctioning and material nature executing. Every action we do. So when we understand this, then we become cognizant of our minute independence, our tiny position. But never are we drawn, the action started though with our desire. Now, I'll go one level deeper. The actual ability to desire comes also from Krishna. Matashmitir jnanam apohanam cha. He says, for me, I give the living entity remembrance and forgetfulness of different ideas so that they can even express the desires that they want. That's how dependent we are.
So actually there is no free will then.
No, there is full free will. Otherwise we would not come. No, there is free will. Because we are never programmed to do X, Y, and Z. And we have factual proof of that. If you have mother and father, and they have a child, right? If the child had no free will and they were doing only exactly as mother and father wanted, would there be any disruption? Huh? We are all children of Krishna. Why there is disruption? Krishna doesn't want violence. He doesn't want people to do these things and other things. He wants everyone. If there was no free will, there'd be no material world. Material world was simply created out of our desire to be separate from Krishna. Why would Krishna would ever want that? Right?
Actually, I heard an example of this free will. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure whether that is correct. It is like a cow tied to a pole. That cow, with the pole, the length of the rope is long. The cow can do whatever within that length of the rope. That is not controlled by God. But ultimately, it has free will within that region. After that, it is not having a free will kind of thing. I'm not sure this.
Yeah, it's limited, right? Our free will is limited. It's not absolute. If I want to fly in the sky right now, I cannot do that. I can desire, and get a bird body and fly in the sky. But again, my free will, it's limited. So that's not a bad way to think about it. I have this, limited range of what I can do. But the thing that we have to understand is when Krishna says, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai kramani sarvasha, that you are not the doer, 2 chapters later, he says, I am not the doer. Don't hold me responsible for your actions. So now we can say, wait a minute. I'm not the doer. Krishna is saying, who is the doer? So Krishna then fills in the blank, says, you are the doer because you are the instigator of the desire. You express your desire through your free will, and then the chain of actions take place out of your control. So that is why there's karma. If we had no free will, then what is the point of karma? Karma is a response to the exercise of our free will. If I, in exercise, do good things, I get good karma. And if I exercise my free will and do bad things, I get bad karma. If there's no free will, then there's no point of even karma. Right? So all of this manifests in our position. But we have to remember that it is not absolute free will. Krishna's will is absolute. He chooses when he wants to appear, where he wants to appear, when he wants to leave. All those things. There's nothing that can stop Krishna's desire. Ours is subject to many other. Yes?
So Prabhuji, if I desire to chant, what's stopping me to chant? I mean, where should I put more, focus? Or, what can improve? Even though I have a desire, but something is stopping me, or some obstacle is there. How do I overcome of that?
Because, fortunately or unfortunately, Krishna knows the innermost chamber of our heart. He knows the innermost chamber of our heart. I want to go to the temple, but secretly I'm wishing I have some obstacle because I'm really tired and I don't feel like maybe if it rains I'll have a good reason not to go. But I want to go. Do I? So Krishna knows the innermost, deepest reason. So if we have a desire to chant, it's not happening, but we need to pray to Krishna. Krishna, please intensify my desire. Please help me intensify my desire. I know theoretically that this is the best activity for me. I know it. But I'm not able to intensify that desire sufficient enough that I do it over other things. So Krishna, please help me. Please help me. And of course, with that mood of prayer, Krishna will facilitate. But remember, our pace of progress in bhakti is based on the intensity of our desire. That is the price we have to pay. No other price.
And the intensity of the desire is again free will.
Yeah.
You are exercising that, okay, my entire thing I want to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But somewhere I read it is based that unless otherwise you develop the taste towards Krishna, you're doing Krishna conscious activities, selling books, whatever it is that are making prasadam,
Yeah.
whatever it is. It is very tough to even chant the 16 rounds or something like that.
Yeah, because without taste,
How to develop that more taste, more affinity?
yeah, it's a Cheto Darpana Marjanam, Baba Mahadavagni Nivapanam, Shreya Kairvachandika Vitaranam, Vidya Vadu Jivanam. That the taste for chanting is actually the intrinsic natural nature of the soul. The soul loves and enjoys glorifying and chanting and engaging with the Supreme Lord. That is the intrinsic nature. But that nature has been covered by the false ego and by all the material contaminants. So that's why we have to Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Marjanam, cleanse the heart. What is the best soap to cleanse the heart? The chanting of the holy names. So we recognize, we pray to Krishna. Krishna, I am so unfortunate. I have no attraction for your holy names. They're so powerful. Please bestow this taste, this attraction upon me. I have taste for so many other nonsensical things. And I'm so weak in my disposition. But I know by your strength, by your mercy, you can help me revive my original nature. If we pray in this way and approach our chanting, and we have to do our part, remaining steadfast in our chanting. Because Krishna will see, okay, my dear devotee, he is trying. He is being resolute. Even though he's not enjoying, he's not getting the rasa, he's still doing. Krishna will not let that go unanswered. He'll not let that go unanswered. And this is why we talk, a lot about, when we talk about initiation into spiritual life. Sometimes we become fearful of these vows. But actually they're the greatest blessing to us. Why? Because when we make a vow and we have some now external stimulus to stick to our chanting, our own self, we might be a little bit, because that taste is not developing, we have anarthas, we have this influence of the material world, but by making those vows, this is Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. It's an external impetus that helps us chant the holy names. And that's why it's the most glorious of processes. And why the Guru will chant on the Japamala and then give to us, empowering those beads, so that we can make us. Chanting's hard, but it's so simple, but it's hard at the same time, right? So we need the mercy and potency of Guru Parampara Krishna. Then it will happen. So we should pray in this way for both the intense desires, and Krishna will not let that prayer go unanswered. But we must intensify our desire, and all along the way, keep at it. Keep doing it. We do our part, and Krishna will answer. But don't expect, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years I've been chanting, nothing's happening. Millions of lifetimes we have spent building all this conditioning, this false ego. It's not going to go away in 1, 2, 3 years of hand in the bead bag. But we're making gigantic progress.
But is there somewhere in Shastra they told about that easy way, like I mean you were talking about 1 year, 2 year, 3 year kind of thing. Is there somewhere in Shastra they told like, okay,
What?
you do this, you can realize it immediately, kind of thing.
Yeah, read the pastime of Ajamil. 6th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. He didn't take 1 year, 3 years. His instant. Because he chanted the holy names without any offenses. So,
That is one more thing I want to ask you.
but hold on, let me answer your first question first.
Okay.
So, throughout Shastra, it's explained. I mean, Harinam, 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 Eva Kalom, Kalom, Nashteva, Nashteva, Nashteva. It is the only way. Harinama, Harinama, Harinama. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, the Mahatma. What did the Mahatmas do? Satatam Kirtayanto Mam. They're always chanting my glories. And what is their experience? They're so happy and blissful. So, this chanting process is explained throughout Shastra. And we see so many examples. Magari the hunter met Narada Muni, was the most wretched of people, half killing animals, just for the pleasure of seeing them suffer. He didn't know any better. And when Narada Muni approached him, he was humble. Oh, I had no idea. Narada Muni said, give all this up. Magari said, okay. And he started chanting. And what happened? Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest. What did he start chanting? What did he start doing? Chanting. Under the instruction of his guru, Narada Muni. And within a few months, Lord Vishnu himself came and gave him darshan. So there is endless evidence. And again, the duration. There's no fixed duration. Hey, you have spent 7.9 million lives, you have to spend. The duration is based on the intensity of our desire. So if we're feeling some slowness in the process, just get out the mirror, put it down to the heart,
Responsible.
and say, okay, it's just like if people are going to the gym, I always use this example, and they come out and say, I'm not feeling it. Don't look at the equipment in the gym. Look at yourself and say, okay, well, how am I not applying this equipment correctly? Same thing. This process is so potent. But we have to apply it with the right way, with the great enthusiasm. How to do it? That is the whole Bhagavad Gita. And ultimately, that is Chaitanya Charitamrita. Why Krishna himself reappeared after this conclusion? To show us the exact process of bhakti. Krishna himself came. And he said one thing, just chant. And do it with great enthusiasm and sincerity. You had a second question?
I chat sometimes like Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Rama Hare Hare, something like that. But you need to go with the exact flow, correct? I mean, those chants which is not, if you say Ram instead of Rama, is it still correct? Like?
Yeah, I mean, so in Karma Kanda processes, the pronunciation, the syllables, the meter, everything is like very exacting in order to get the result. In chanting of the holy names, it is not like that, but we should be very attentive to chanting all 16 words, hearing all 16 words, and not like blurring them or mumbling them through. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Like, we should be able to hear all 16 words. If you cannot hear all 16 words, slow down.
Ram and Rama both are okay.
Ram and Rama are both okay. there that has been you can pronounce it in one or two. It is technically Rama, 2 syllables, but yes, in the chanting process, in the japa process. So that's why there's also said, like, if you're chanting, if you're chanting inside less than 6 minutes, you should slow down. 6, even 5.5. 5 is like absolute, but in that range, you just should slow down, because you're virtually guaranteed to be, unless you're one of those auction people, they can speak really fast. Those people who run up, you cannot pronounce all 16 words properly. So that's why some people chant. They watch a clock, not to see time, but to make sure that sometimes inadvertently, or we're skipping beats. We chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, and then Hare Ram, Ram Ram. So it happens. No, so
sometimes I complete the mala very fast.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay.
Something's
I don't know really how it happened. Right?
Yeah. So that's why, like, we do measure a little bit. So just to make because we're not so attentive yet. But the best way is by hearing all 16 names. But so if you see that variation, then something might have been awry. Then chant an extra round.
Yeah, sometimes the normal time for me is almost 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I complete it within 5 minutes. Am I correct?
Yeah. Usually something is off when it happens like that, unless it's sometimes when you're in a very meditative state you can, but anything inside of 6 is usually kind of a red flag.
15
Yes.
minutes to chanting.
Huh?
15 minutes to chanting. That is the normal flow. 15 minutes to chanting.
15.
2 rounds.
15.
Two rounds.
15.
Yeah.
I
For
thought
you.
16 rounds in 15 minutes.
What would 15 minutes?
He thought 16 rounds in 15
Oh, no,
minutes.
Everybody has a slightly different pace, right? Based on there's a linguistic aspect to it. So there's a slightly different pace that everybody can.
Yeah.
You should know what your own pace is, and there's no right pace. Remember, you can be chanting 15 minutes one round, but if your mind is wandering everywhere, so let's not get into focus on, okay, am I just hearing all 16 words and making sure that I can hear those words, and you work at a pace that's comfortable for you. For some people, I'll tell you, the faster they chant, the less the mind wanders, and so that's okay. Other people, the faster they chant, they're just in a hurry to get, so we cannot compare. We have to look internal and just introspect ourselves and figure out what's the way to make sure that we can be as attentive to the names and hearing them and controlling the mind. That works for us, right? Some people are really good at chanting and sitting. Some people are better when they're walking. Again, we're all different. Find what works for us with the goal, remembering Krishna and hearing the names.
But old times, the rishis, whoever is chanted, like Guru Maharaj and everybody, which I heard, they sit in one place and then chant, right?
Yeah.
And they close their eyes and then they chant like that.
Yeah,
Not
they
by walking or.
Yeah, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was chanting and walking all the time also. He was doing Harinam Sankirtan. So again, there's at the end of the day, it's not about the mechanics. It's about what's happening in the consciousness while we're chanting. That's the main thing, right? So I can be sitting in the most yogic posture and chanting, and if I'm meditating on the movie that I want to go see and I'm chanting, what's the point? I might look good, but right? So it's not about the mechanics as it is about the execution. So whatever works for us, we should be, whatever works for each of us, thinking about, okay, how can I increase my meditation and hearing of the names? And the best thing is to hear all 16 words in the mantra, because by hearing it, you force the mind. You don't let the mind can't go anywhere else. If it is hearing, it is by definition not going anywhere else. Sometimes you don't know how I can control the mind. Just hear all 16 words. Because when you do that, the mind cannot go. The mind cannot do in 2 places at once. This is the one benefit of this mind. It's single track actually. We think it can multitask. It cannot. It's single track. So if you hear all 16 words, the mind was at least fixed on that one mantra. Huh? Go ahead, Martin.
While chanting in a group, Prabhuji, we are not able to listen what we are chanting, but instead we are hearing others chanting. So is that okay?
Yeah, But it's still like that. If you try to make the other chanting a little bit of background, which is very transcendental background, so that if we do stop hearing ours, we hear someone else's. But try to make our hearing. So you might hear some people, they chant like this. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Why? Because when you plug one ear, it's louder inside the oral cavity. Some people chant with earplugs. They're not plugging out outside sound, but they're trying to keep the sound of their own chanting louder in. So again, different techniques. But we should try to hear our chanting. But the great potency of chanting in Sangha, one, we get the benefit of Sangha, but also because when we stop hearing ours, we'll hear at least someone else's chanting, right? So that's the goal. So like, people chant with Srila Prabhupada's japa going, and that is the kind of idea. And also when we hear others chanting and they're chanting enthusiastic, it inspires us, right? We become inspired in association. That's why we all get on a call every morning and chant together, because it's inspiring. Huh?
But not in youth, right?
Again, based on what is comfortable for you. We don't want to create too many. The best is we all get together in the temple and chant together, right? That's the ideal. That's not practical, right? So we have practical situations that take place, particularly in mornings in Grasta homes, right? We have practical situations. So just even showing up is a great step one.
What exactly you'll be thinking and chanting?
Thinking and chanting?
Or you will not be thinking and chanting. Or you will be telling only the namas and then listen that.
That is the best. If we try to think too much, the mind will just...
Even if you think, Krishna,
Yeah, it's just hard because we're not yet purified. So the best is to hear the names. By hearing, you'll pull the names in. But if you can, having some of these prayers, thinking of these prayers, Krishna, please, give me the taste of chanting. Help me develop a stronger desire. These prayers are very powerful. So one suggestion, if we want to really enthuse our chanting, before we start our chanting, chant to Shikshashtakam prayers. We went through a detailed discussion of those. Why? To hopefully inspire everyone to start chanting these every day. And if you really want to chant the Shikshashtakam prayers before you chant, then recite the 10 offenses to the holy names. Become aware of them. Then if you like, set one goal for your chanting. One prayer for your chanting today. Krishna, please let me take one step closer to having some taste for your chanting. Something. Just by doing that action, actually you'll find your chanting becomes more focused. And if you really want to do it, keep a diary. March 26th, this was my goal. March 27th, like that. Just by writing it down. Simple. It can be 3 lines, 1 line. You'll find that the purpose of your chanting becomes more purposeful. And by then your mind will come in. Again, it's a lifelong process of improving our chanting. It is a lifelong process. And it is a blissful lifelong journey. It'll get sweeter and sweeter and sweeter as we cleanse the heart. Yes.
The way you explain Ram and Rama, they are both okay, but best to pronounce Rama in the chanting. How about the Krishna? So we say Krishna and Krishna.
Say what? What's the 2 iterations?
So in the chanting we say Ram and Rama. You suggested Rama is okay too, and it's good to use the Rama. The same way there are we call it Bhagwan Shri Krishna, and sometimes we call Krishna. What's the best to
Krishna.
Krishna.
Krishna. Krishna is the pronunciation.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna is okay. Krishna is okay, right?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. See, sometimes we say Hare Krishna. It's not Hari. Hari is something different. Hari is also Krishna. Hare is referring to Srimati Radharani. So it's Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And it's Hare Rama, not Hare Ramo, or Hare, there's other, it's Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. So, being a little bit attentive. But again, there are also linguistic issues, right? We may come from an accent where we have hard time pronouncing certain things. Again, we do the best we can, but we should try to be attentive to those, pronunciations as best we can. The mantra is pretty simple, so.
You can sit on sofa and do the chanting.
Huh?
Sofa and you can use.
You can sit in your bed, so it doesn't matter. Don't fall asleep.
That is the problem. Sofa means we lean and.
Then don't sit in the sofa. I don't recommend it only for that reason. But if that's comfortable for you, great. But if it's going to make you fall asleep, sit on the floor. If you cannot sit on the floor, sit against the wall. Do something. Sit on a sheet of ice. Whatever you need. Don't sleep. Don't sleep while chanting. That's why you should sleep early and rise early. Sleep early, rise early. And chant your rounds and train your body. Chanting early morning every day, 7 days a week, is what gives, your body will adjust and it won't sleep. But if you sleep, no problem, just keep some water. or one spray bottle. I've seen some devotees with spray bottle and they'll spray themselves. Oh yeah, devotees have amazing tools for attentive chanting. So many wonderful tools.
In the morning, normally, once you get up and then take bath and then morning rituals are over. How do you start the prayer? Because I have a Krishna small idol in my home.
So chanting,
how do you start it? I started with Abhishekam, but is it really correct? I don't know really that those things are.
The worship of the deity? That's a little bit more different. There's different systems. We follow the Pancharatric Vidhi system of deity worship in general. And so, again, and there's a difference between home worship and temple worship, right? So home worship is a little bit more simplified so that we can, again, take to the process of our chanting. You can do Abhishek. Always chanting Maha Mantra is like the all-in-one perfect mantra in all circumstances, all situations. So by simply, chanting that. But we typically invoke the Panchatattva mantra before chanting Maha Mantra. And before that, we typically invoke Guru Pranam prayers. So we invoke the Guru Pranam prayers, Panchatattva prayers, and then Maha Mantra. Because we are accessing Krishna through Guru Parampara, through the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? So that's why, we chant Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutavesham Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Putrayane Nirishvesha Sunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine, offering our obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. If you have taken initiation or shelter, you will chant your Guru Param prayers, then Prabhupada's, and then Panchatattva, and then we start Japa. Many devotees will chant all that at the beginning of each round of japa also. That's also good. But at least minimum at the beginning of each japa round, we should chant Panchatattva prayers. So at the beginning of each, after completing each round, before beginning the next round, we chant Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Like that we should.
So my question is, Abhishekam is okay for Krishna because some people told Abhishekam is mainly for
No.
Shiva is Abhishekam and then Krishna is mainly you shouldn't do.
Lord Indra begged for forgiveness after the whole Govardhan Lila with what? Abhishek. He brought Airavata and performed elaborate Abhishek of Krishna. Abhishek of Krishna is all fine. We do in the temple all the time, Janmashtami. We do Snanyatra, Lord Jagannath. Abhishek. Krishna enjoys Abhishek.
Every day we do it, or is it in the temple also? It is once a while, right?
In temple, the deities are the Radha Kunjvihari are bathed every day, every morning. But again, at home, that's typically not done just because it's from a time practicality. So some people do it once a week, once a month, like that. From a home worship perspective, but in the temple. They are every day. Abhishek is performed.
Krishna likes decoration.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day you can do Abhishek and Alankar.
Abhishek.
good discussion on chanting today.
Very nice.
Yeah.
More clarity, more suggestions.
We can have whole seminars on japa chanting.
Maybe Prabhu needs a new kind of alarm to wake you up or chant. Like something should hammer on you.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I remember once I was in Mayapur, and whole devotees were chanting. I said, devotees have wonderful ways. And I saw one devotee, and he had a clothespin. You know the clothespin? He had a clothespin on his finger. And I said, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. I was wondering, what is this clothespin? And so then I asked him. I said, I see you have this clothes. What is this? So I don't fall asleep.
So, Mataji, you know all the tricks, right?
So whatever it takes to keep alert. And ultimately, the taste of the holy names will emerge, and it will be so blissful that it will be an ecstasy. As my Guru Maharaj always says, nobody falls asleep in front of prasadam, right? So it is because we have taste for prasadam. So we'll develop in time taste for chanting, but until then, keep doing, and be patient. Utsaha nischaya daryat. Be patient. It takes some time, but be confident. It will happen. Okay? Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. So we'll chant.